Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I just watched The Bear season 2. Let's talk about it. So The Bear is a series that was created by Christopher Storer, and this is a series that I checked out in, I think, late summer last year, where you guys were recommending it to me, and I was like, what's going on here? Everyone seems to be talking about this The Bear series. When it was initially released, it didn't really get a lot of buzz. People kind of just looked at it with a side eye because of the weird name as well. But soon after, some people gave it a chance. They were spreading the word that this was one of the very best series to come out in 2022, and many of us were convinced to check it out, and we have never looked back because this ended up being not only one of the best series to come out in 2022, but one of the best shows that has been released in recent memory. I love The Bear. I think this is a phenomenal show, and season 2 just proved that season 1 was not a one-hit wonder, because oh my goodness, they managed to make lightning strike twice. So season 2 picks up right where we left off in season 1, where it was discovered that Carmy's brother Michael had left them a bunch of money so that he could finally open the restaurant of his dreams and call it The Bear. Now Carmy had a really complicated relationship with Michael, but ultimately they did have this like dream where they would start up this new restaurant together, you know, using the property of the old restaurant, the beef, that their parents had purchased, but you know, kind of modernizing it and doing something unique and special. But because of that complicated relationship, and also because of Michael's, you know, unreliability, they weren't able to realize that dream before he died. And so seeing that final gift that his brother left him was really emotional for Carmy, but it also kind of lit a fire, well, it lit a fire under his ass, and it pushed him to, you know, start this dream and actually make it a reality. And on top of that, he has his family, he has his team behind him, including newcomer Sydney, who is my sister. We'll talk about Sydney in a second, okay? But I'm the biggest fan of Ayo Edebiri, okay? And I'm the biggest fan of Sydney. Don't even try it, okay? But yes, I'm going to be diving into each of the characters, including my good sis, in a moment. But we're going to start off with the overall season. So season 2 takes us on the journey of The Bear being actually created, which I think was an excellent idea, because this is gold. Like, they managed to squeeze out gold from every single aspect, from the electronics, from the, you know, engineering, from the food, you know, creating the menu. Every single aspect of creating a restaurant was explored in this season and done so well. Of course, anchored by these incredibly brilliant, lovable, charismatic characters that we've come to love after season 1. But going back to the creation of The Bear, you know, before they're able to create this new restaurant, they have to tear down the old one. And so we have to say goodbye to the beef, you know, once and for all, which is obviously really emotional because this was a restaurant that Carmy's, you know, father had founded. But once they actually start getting rid of that old restaurant, when they start taking out all of the appliances, unhooking things, you know, getting rid of the paint, all of these faults start to resurface, and they realize that they have an even bigger task at hand than they even anticipated. And so even the money that Michael had managed to, you know, squirrel away for them wasn't enough, and they had to go back to Uncle Uncle Jay, okay? They had to go back in order to get even more money for this huge endeavor. Now, as someone who is a huge fan of before and afters, as someone who is a huge fan of like home renovations and makeovers, you know, I like makeovers of all sorts, whether it be makeup makeovers or house makeovers or anything. I was really excited by the prospect of actually getting to see, you know, the formation of the bear. All of these little building blocks that they were demonstrating throughout the season were really fascinating to me, and it was so satisfying seeing the final results near the end of the season. I think they should have made more of a big deal about that, actually, giving us a full-on, you know, tour of the new restaurant. But yeah, I lived for this. As someone who loves before and afters, I was having a great old time. And another thing that I really loved about the exploration of, you know, opening this new restaurant is, first of all, because Carmy like steps in it and he basically gives himself an impossible deadline. He is the one that says, okay, when they're talking to Uncle Jimmy, he is the one that says that they can do this in 18 months. No one said the words 18 months, like no one else mentioned that. Okay, he could have given himself at least 2 years. 2 years would have been reasonable, especially because in this world COVID is a thing, so they should have at least done 2 years. But no, he, you know, opened his big old mouth and said, okay fine, we'll do this in 18 months, I promise. And it's like, sir, promising who? Everyone else is looking at him like, oh, you promise, eh? Like, how is that gonna work? So of course, having this huge impending deadline, you know, hovering over each of these characters just added to that feeling of intensity and stress and anxiety that we know that these characters often feel anyways. But it was just so much more intense this season because of that deadline. You know, you really felt like they were, you know, running out of time. And there were other ways that this storyline introduced stakes for these characters. One prime example was, I believe, episode 8, where they have this fire suppression test that they need to pass, and they have been failing all of the tests previously. They don't know what is going on. You have Fak, you know, trying his best to sort this out, but he has no idea why it's not working and why there seems to be a gas leak each time until, well, I'm not gonna say the words, okay, but until he has the realization that one of Mikey's tactics to perhaps gain some insurance money may have led to them not being able to pass a fire suppression test. So he ultimately fixes that issue with the gas pipes, and they manage to pass the test. But before that moment when they pass, you have this intense scene where everyone is in the kitchen watching this tiny blue balloon, you know, determine their fates for the coming months, and they are just terrified because they know they can't afford to fail yet another test mere 2 weeks before the opening of this restaurant. And so you just go down each of the characters, you know, across the line, and you see their faces, and then you get this like montage of, you know, their previous mistakes and everything that has led up to them being there in that moment. And again, it just creates that sense of high stakes and intensity, really showing what passing this test would mean to each and every one of these characters. And I was invested. I was on the edge of my seat for this fire suppression test. I was like, oh my God, they need to pass this. Please, God, please let them pass this test. I was so invested in these people's lives. You would not believe it. That is just brilliant storytelling, and of course, brilliant performances. We'll talk about the characters in a second, but the storytelling there was just done so expertly. Another way that this season emphasized the stakes at hand and really created a sense of desperation whilst these characters were trying to get this restaurant built was through highlighting the uncertain environment that they were trying to open this restaurant in. You have this episode where Sydney is forced to go on some taste testing adventures by herself because Carmy has ditched her, and she's, you know, meeting with all of these locals, and she's, you know, eating at these local restaurants and enjoying their food, but she also sees all of these headlines about restaurants that have closed, you know, restaurants that were open for 3 years, 10 years, 12 years, and even a restaurant that had a Michelin star. And that's a huge deal because she's kind of relying on a star in order to be a crutch, in order to ensure that they'll remain open for the coming years. And so seeing that even a restaurant that did get that coveted star was still shut down because of lack of revenue is really frightening for her. And so that's one of the biggest fears that this character has to deal with throughout the season, is being aware of the environment that they're trying to open this restaurant in and feeling a sense of helplessness and fear deep down because of how many other restaurants have failed. Another element of season 2's story that I loved so much and I was so invested in were the character deep dives, or the character spotlight episodes, where we got some more background information on some of these key characters to really help flesh them out on the show. And I think great examples were obviously Carmy and Sydney, but we also got that amazing episode with Marcus in Copenhagen. Oh my goodness. And even Ritchie. Oh my god, we will talk about Ritchie, okay? But I just love the way that this show treated those characters in particular, the ones that really got the limelight, the shine, because first of all, they're brilliantly portrayed by the actors, but also it just helps make the team feel so much more fleshed out and well-rounded. And again, you buy into the stakes and you become invested in what they're trying to do here, this journey of opening up this restaurant, because you feel for the characters, and you're able to feel for the characters more when you feel like you know them better. And the final aspect of the story that I wanted to highlight and what I really appreciated was the comedy. I thought this season was funnier. Is that just my imagination? I don't know, maybe I was in a cheerier mood. Actually, that's not true. No, that's not true. I was stressed the whole time, so it can't be that. It can't be that at all. I genuinely think that this season had funnier little tidbits here and there, and perhaps that's in response to some people saying that it's not really a comedy. I've always upheld that this is a comedy. It's just like a dark kind of comedy that leans more towards drama, a dramedy, if you will, a dark, realistic, gritty, grimy, filthy, disturbing, upsetting dramedy. But still, the comedy is there. Okay, the comedy is there, and the comedy was intensified this season. Sometimes it got a bit goofy, but honestly, I didn't mind because there was such intense moments. We'll talk about it. There were such intense moments that I felt like having that kind of goofy comedic release was kind of like a nice relief, you know. It was warranted considering how intense the drama aspect of the season can be. Oh, and also one more thing when it comes to the story before we dive into the individual characters, which I'm sure you want to hear my thoughts on. But when it comes to the story, I think it was a great decision to get out of the kitchen a little bit more this season, a lot more this season. First of all, it makes sense just, you know, logically, because they're literally breaking everything apart and smashing it to bits and starting from scratch. So we didn't really need to be around that all the time. We got bits and pieces of that in strategic moments, and it was very well handled. And also on top of that, this is the second season. We do want to see more. We do want to see this world expanded, and what better way to convey that expansion than by getting them out of the beef, okay? So, you know, during this transitional period, we see a lot more movement outside of the restaurant. We see, for instance, Sydney going to other restaurants in the area and sampling their food as she tries to reconnect with her love of cooking. We also see Carmy. Carmy's a man of the streets, okay? Carmy's a man of the streets, so he's walking the streets. And of course, we get Marcus's trip to Copenhagen. Oh my god, Marcus's trip to Copenhagen. So I love that. Okay, now it's time. Speaking of the characters, let's get into it. And we're of course going to start off with the man of the hour himself, Mr. Berzatto, okay? And Carmy, come here, sir. Come here, take a seat. Yeah, he was kind of wilding out this season, not gonna lie. Like I was kind of shook by Carmy this season, because you think that with all of the passion that he has as, you know, being this chef who is so prestigious and so highly regarded, that precision that he has, that experience, and that has ultimately emotionally damaged him, to be fair. But you think with all of that, plus the passion of opening this new restaurant that comes from his relationship with his brother and his family, you know, with all of that baggage on his shoulders, you'd think he'd take it more seriously. Like you think, like you'd think that he would be more on board with actually making this business succeed. But Mr. Berzatto gets a little bit distracted this season, and honestly, I disapproved. Honestly, there's two parts of me here. The first part of Jean, okay, appreciates the writing, because it was very clever writing to have Carmy, this perfectionist, this person who was broken down by the restaurant industry previously, you know, doing this fine dining for all of these wealthy people and just being forced to, you know, follow these strict rules and be beaten down by his, you know, head chef constantly. I completely understand why a character like that would just start to frazzle a little bit and ultimately having him pursue something that is separate from the restaurant and be interested in this woman in the form of Claire, you know, that makes perfect sense narratively, and like, well done to the writers for doing that. They did their thing, okay? It was a great character arc for Carmy to have. However, then there's the second part of Jean, okay? Hi, this is the second part, who wants to see the bear succeed by any means necessary. I'm not joking. I want everyone to succeed. I want them to all be disgustingly wealthy. Like, I just want them to be happy and successful, okay, and skilled and brilliant. And so when Carmy was letting the side down, my side, my family side down, all for this Claire character, I was annoyed, not gonna lie. I was annoyed. I was like, Carmy, you need to focus up. And then when Uncle Jimmy, you know, comes to him, gives him that long lecture about sports, and I was like, oh, sports? Oh, I'm taken aback a little bit here. But he ends up talking about this baseball game where you had this baseball player, I don't do sports, but you have this baseball player who I guess got overconfident and therefore complacent, and he thought that he could catch the ball with his hand or maybe with the glove or either or whatever, and ended up fumbling with both. And that's kind of what happens to Carmy at the end there, where he was supposed to call Tim or Terry or Tom or whoever it was, and that was supposed to fix the fridge handle. Whilst at the same time you had Claire calling him, and she had a very important message of her own, and he ends up answering neither. And all because he lacks focus, and that's exactly what he needs in this crucial moment where he is about to realize his and his brother's dream. So yes, whilst it is heartbreaking that Carmy experienced so much abuse and so much emotional torture and damage from working in those, you know, fine dining restaurants previously, you know, trying to sustain the 3 stars of one of the best restaurants in the world, you know, it broke him. Okay, it damaged him emotionally, physically, mentally, but the results speak for themselves. Because he did that. Like, he did that. Okay. He was fierce competition, as Chef Luca will tell you. And so we kind of need that Carmy back. Now, I'm not saying that there can't be a balance, and I think that's what season 3 will be about. I think season 2 was about him, you know, diving into that college frat boy era for a little bit, you know, going to a house party, seeing what it's all about, to have that kind of young in your 20s experience when you're not under constant pressure to be the best and beat the best in this extremely competitive industry. So that was nice for him to experience that, and it was nice for Claire to show him that. We'll talk about Claire in a second. But I think ultimately for this restaurant, for this huge endeavor to work, and for him to not be a disappointing business partner to Sydney, he needs to get some of that old Carmy back. We need a little bit of that old Carmy seasoning to be sprinkled in there, because right now there's a lack of balance in both sides of this character, and well, we saw the consequences in the season finale. My guy was locked in the fridge that he forgot to fix. Like, it also, that was just so brilliantly comic. Like, it was just it was like, oh, I love the writing on this show. The fact that he got stuck in the very same fridge that he kept forgetting to get fixed, all I can say is that's karma. Yep. Now, still on the topic of Carmy, we have 2 more main things. We have Claire, which we'll talk about in a second. But first of all, I want to tackle the episode called Fishes, I believe it was. That was the Christmas flashback episode, I believe, where we got this incredible insight into the Berzatto family trauma, where we got some incredible guest stars in that episode, and they all delivered phenomenal performances, especially Jamie Lee Curtis and John Bernthal. Wow. Like, that was like, they were, oh, I mean, John Bernthal was great in the first season, but here he's given like meat. Like, here he's given meat to work with. That fork throwing scene alone, Emmy potential, surely. Best guest actor, I'm sensing. But then you have Jamie Lee Curtis, who is just, I mean, she was phenomenal in this, honestly. And I was talking mess about her earlier this year with the Oscars. We don't need to worry about that, okay? But all I'm saying is, sis, you know, she showed up and did the thing. She did the job, okay? Because she was incredible as the Berzatto matriarch, who clearly suffered from some mental health issues, from some alcoholism, and her daughter was trying to help her, but her constantly asking if her mother was okay was not helpful at all. And she reached a breaking point in that episode, you know, after she had done all of this work. She just reached a breaking point, and she felt like no one cared about her. She felt like no one appreciated her, and this was obviously all in her mind. It didn't really convey what actually happened in those series of events when everyone was offering to help. You know, it was just it was such a complex and fascinating character to add to the Berzatto family. It's just adding these rich like layers and shades and complexity to this rich tapestry of the Berzatto family, and I can't wait to see more and more as the seasons go on. And in particular, it was so heartbreaking. Oh my god, it was so heartbreaking to see Donna actually make it to the opening of the bear, and she ended up not going inside. You know, none of the kids actually knew that she was there. And you have Pete of all people. Even Pete is given a moment this season, but he actually sees her outside, and he is trying his best to get this woman to go in the restaurant. Just, you know, let your kids see that you showed up for them. But she doesn't. You know, she can't get over this mental block, and it's just the most heartbreaking thing. And yeah, ultimately she ends up walking away. Again, I can't wait to see this further explored in season 3. We best get a season 3 that stats, okay, although there is a writer's strike, so respect on that end. But after the strike, okay, it was just brilliant. And like I said, Jamie Lee Curtis, you know, she didn't just come to show up and look pretty. She was doing the actoring. And then finally, on the topic of Carmy, we need to discuss Claire. Now, first of all, please forgive me. Please forgive me, okay? I hope you understand. I hope you don't hold this against me, or like I'm really trying my best here to be, you know, a positive little corner of the internet with Jean's movie chats. But right now, I just feel like being a hater. Like, I need to be a hater for just 1 second. If you can allow me this 1 second to be a hater, I would really appreciate it, because I disliked Claire strongly. I strongly disliked Claire, and there's no particular reason. You know, she's a fine character. I think Molly Gordon did a good job portraying the character. She was likable enough. Like, she's fine. There's nothing wrong with Claire on paper, but in my mind, she annoyed the hell out of me. First of all, because she was distracting Carmy from his duties as a business partner, okay, but also because she wasn't part of my vision board. She wasn't part of my story. She wasn't part of my agenda, because my agenda is Carmy and Sydney. I don't know why this girl decided to rock up out of nowhere and be the childhood, you know, crush that Carmy had, and she's all of a sudden just shown up, and they have so much history, and Ritchie is so invested in this love story for whatever reason, and she's just there, just in the middle of my vision board, which did not include her. Like, she wasn't in this before, because I need Carmy and Sydney to get together. Like, that's what I need, me personally. So that's why I was annoyed at her. Again, I'm being petty, I'm being a hater, absolutely. Like, I hold my hands up and admit it, absolutely, but it doesn't change the fact that watching scenes with her and Carmy was painful. So yeah, I was annoyed every time she was on camera. I was like, this is not what I need right now. This wasn't part of my vision. I'm upset that this is happening. But again, narratively, oh, Brilliant writing. This is just me being a hater. It has nothing to do with the quality of writing or acting at all. At all. Don't mind me. Speaking of Sydney, speaking of my sister, let's get to her next. Ayo Edebiri. You know, if Ayo Edebiri has one fan, that fan is me. And I know she doesn't have one fan because she has been everywhere this year. She has been working hard. I did see that video of her at an awards ceremony where she was saying, like, you know, call me up, like, get my agent on the phone, because she really wants to work. You know, she wants to pay her bills, and paying her bills she has been doing because she's been showing up everywhere, and I love that for her. So I'm a huge fan of hers. I love her style of comedy, especially on like the red carpet. There was one red carpet where she pretended to be the donkey from Banshees of Inisherin. Like, she's a comedic genius. Like, she's a stand-up comedian. She's a comedic genius. So like, we can't sleep on Ayo at all. And I just love her portrayal of Sydney. And I felt bad for her because she was done dirty this season, where she has invested so much essentially in someone else's dream because her dream didn't work out. You know, when she had that catering business, ultimately it flopped. And so to see her so thoroughly invested and wrapped up in this Berzatto world and then be let down by the Berzatto man himself, I was like, this can't stand. This can't stand, because she is showing up and doing 120% every single day. So sir, why aren't you? Now, we do also briefly dive into Sydney's past, where we discover that her mother passed away from lupus when she was only 4 years old, and we get to explore her relationship with her father a little bit more this season. We see him express a lot of worry and trepidation when it comes to this new endeavor that Sydney has been wrapped up in, because he's seen his daughter go through a lot with the failure of her previous business endeavor, but also seeing how much, you know, passion and honestly obsession she pours into this also worries him, because he wants her to be happy and successful. And at that point, he isn't quite sure if it's worth all of this. But he does show up on the opening of The Bear, and he loves the food. He says it's incredible. They have that moment where she's throwing up by the bins, and it's just beautiful. Like, oh, it's just magnificent. And it's a very short, concise storyline. It doesn't play a huge role in the season, but again, there's such great follow through with the writing that it does come full circle at the end, where he does finally understand that this is Sydney's calling and that she was right to invest in this. A second more prominent storyline that Sydney has this season is her trying to kind of rediscover her love of cooking and kind of reset her palate, so to speak. And this all comes about at the beginning of the season, where, you know, she and Carmy are trying to curate a menu together, and they're trying out these different recipes, but things just aren't working out. You know, things are coming out too sour, too sweet, too salty, like something is just not working. And so that's why she goes on this, you know, journey that was supposed to be with Carmy. He bailed. She goes on this journey across Chicago, trying out these different foods from local restaurants to kind of reset that palate. And that's where she kind of rediscovers her love of cooking and, you know, creating menus and coming up with interesting recipes. So that's a really great journey for her as well. But ultimately, the journey that I want to discuss the most, sorry, I'm so sorry. I know I never wanted to be that girl. But okay, that table scene, listen, this is what it has driven me to. We need to talk about the journey of the relationship between her and Carmy, because what's going on there? What's going on there? I remember talking about this last year, but I wasn't sure, because we didn't get many signs last year in season 1. I remember whispering it a little bit, just kind of mentioning it as like a food for thought. But this season, I don't know what to think. I don't know what to think, and I think the writers are doing it on purpose, because what is going on with Sydney's character? Who is she going to end up with? Listen, I know it's not the most important thing when it comes to her character. She's great, she's funny, she's charismatic, she's a whole complete woman. I completely understand that, but but what I need to know is who is going to be Endgame. Like, because I'm getting the sense that the writers want to suggest that it might be Ritchie, and I think that would be a mistake. please don't tell me that she's doomed to end up with, like, that can't be it. It has to be Carmy. It has to be Carmy, right? That scene when, okay, I had lost hope. I'm all over the place. But before that penultimate episode, I had lost hope. I didn't think anything would come about their relationship. I was like, okay, so Carmy's with Claire, whatever. Okay, fine, I'll deal with it. It's fine. Because it's not a priority when watching this show. It's just a cheeky little add-on, okay, that we're going to chat about. But then the penultimate episode happened. And they were under that table for a good 72 hours. So I'm thinking the writers know what they're doing and they want to confuse me purposely. Maybe they saw my vision board. That might be, that might be it. Except they didn't see my vision board, because that episode where Ritchie shows up, it may have even been the same episode. Ritchie shows up wearing a suit after his personal transformation, and she seems to linger on, that there seems to be, so what's going on? Listen, before I lose my head, okay, in this extremely hot weather, whatever happens, I'm sure it's going to be very well written and just excellent television, okay? So regardless, I'm fully invested. And like I said, this isn't even first, second, third, fourth priority when it comes to this show. But if I'm gonna be shipping someone, I need to know who to ship. I already know who I don't ship, okay? But I need to know who to ship. So just, if the writers could clarify, that would be great. You know, season 3 is coming along, get that sorted so that we're on the same page. And before we move on, for those of you who are like, oh, Sydney and Carmy are just friends, they're just business partners, I would have believed you. I would have believed you reluctantly, but don't tell me that you didn't see anything under that table. That table, please, okay, 72 hours under that table, please. And even if you still don't believe that there could be something there, for whatever reason, at least just let me have my fun. That's all I'm asking. Just let me have my fun. It's fun to ship. I promise you, it's fun. Okay, so next up, let's move on to Ritchie himself. Now, for a good proportion of this season, I was very annoyed with Ritchie. I felt like he was a very stagnant character. He annoyed me in the first season as well, even though he does have that, like, lovable quality to him where you can't be mad at him for too long. It might be the piercing blue eyes, okay? But I was annoyed with him, as per usual. Nothing changed there. He's incompetent. He doesn't know what he's doing. And he, you know, he pretends that he has all of this expertise, but really it's all just a bluff, and he's deeply insecure. And so I just wasn't looking forward to, you know, exploring that once again in the second season of the show. But thankfully, they felt my annoyance. Okay, the writers sensed that I would be annoyed, and they actually gave him a really interesting arc when Carmy sends him to basically be an assistant of some sort, a fork cleaner at his old restaurant. And he learned some things, okay, seeing how an extremely high performing, you know, elite, prestigious restaurant runs, taught him a lot about the kind of service that they can offer at the Bear. And I just love that come up for him. I thought it was done so well. And on top of everything, we got this amazing cameo from Olivia Colman. Okay. But yeah, I just think what they did with Ritchie, first of all, it was about time. It was about damn time, let's be honest. But secondly, it was executed superbly. And I think the actor Ibon Mas Bakrak, I think is how you pronounce his name, he was really stellar in that episode, because you could just see, like, initially he was reluctant to get out of bed. He wasn't having it. But then eventually he came to really appreciate this opportunity and make the most out of it, connect to the people that worked there, and just become so much more proficient and efficient and professional with his role. Next up on the list, we have Marcus, who, as I said, had one of my favorite episodes this season where he traveled to Copenhagen. And just generally as a part of, you know, Sydney and Carmy's business plan to get the Bear up and running, they're trying to upskill their employees. And so they send off Tina and Ibra to a culinary school so they can get their certificates to cook. But they also send off Marcus to Copenhagen. And at first I was a little bit confused as to why he would go to Copenhagen to learn patisserie skills, because I thought, like, isn't that a Parisian thing? Like, wouldn't it make sense to send him off to Paris? But then they show that he ends up staging in Norma, which is the restaurant that Carmy used to work at. And it's actually revealed that he's staying in the same boats that Carmy was living in and feeding the same invisible cat. And he even meets the very same chef, Luca, who was the Scottie Pippen to Carmy's Michael Jordan. And I understand those references now because I watched The Last Dance 2 months ago. But it was so wonderful to see Marcus learning these new skills and being inspired. Like, oh my goodness, I love this guy. Okay, I absolutely love this guy, and I love the adventure that he went on in Copenhagen. Again, it helped to kind of broaden this world because we were introduced to this entirely new environment, but also for his character, it was so enriching to kind of develop those skills and the kind of precision that he had when he returned to make these creations at the Bear. But then you have that added element of the character feeling guilty for enjoying his time in Copenhagen because his mother is currently sick. And you see him constantly, you know, sending his mother pictures of what he's made there. Oh, it's just so endearing. Okay, I love Marcus. But at the very end of the season, you do see his phone blowing up because the nurse is contacting him. I think that there's some bad news that sadly has to be told to him. So we might see the fallout from that in season 3. But that's just going to be so heartbreaking for the character. Now, the Copenhagen episode was also a great introduction into another guest star this season, and that was Will Poulter, who portrayed Chef Luca. Love Chef Luca. I have been seeing 4K images of this guy and his tattooed arms all week on Twitter. Okay, people were obsessed with him. He literally had like one episode, or really just one main scene, that people were rinsing the hell out of. He looks good. We're not denying that, okay? But that's not the purpose of the episode. Although, to be fair, we're all thirsty. It's fine. But I really enjoyed how the Copenhagen episode subverted my expectations, because I had expected Chef Luca to be this real dickhead towards Marcus. I expected him to harbor a lot of resentment towards Carmy, but he was just a chill guy, and he had obviously grown from his experience working alongside Carmy, so that was wonderful. And also to see how patient he was with Marcus and willing to actually teach him, I thought that was really, really great and refreshing. And then you also had this like terrifying scene where Marcus is just walking down the streets of Copenhagen in the middle of the night, and he comes across this man that is literally underneath a fence somehow. He's gotten stuck in a fence and he's literally about to die. He's bleeding and everything. And I thought the worst in that moment, not gonna lie. I thought like, oh my god, what if he gets caught by these Danish police and racially profiled and blah blah blah. Like, I didn't know where that scene was going. It was pretty intense for me, but I'm glad that ultimately he was just, you know, heroic. And I don't know if there's like a message entwined there somehow. I haven't been able to figure that out, but if there is, then please let me know. Now, the only element of Marcus's storyline that I wasn't the biggest fan of was actually at the end of the season, where he tries to ask out Sydney and then gets kind of awkward and irritated even, or at least, you know, really insecure about her reaction. Now, there was obviously this kind of tension between them throughout their interactions, even in season 1, and a lot of people thought that they would be endgame. And, you know, yes, Marcus is an incredible guy. If this was real life, I would absolutely steer Sydney towards his direction without question. Okay, without question. In real life, Marcus is the gold standard. Okay, he should be endgame for sure. But this is the Bear. This is the Bear, and it's grimy and complicated and messy and kind of upsetting, but also euphoric at times. And so I don't think Marcus fits in with that. You know, he can't really be endgame in that environment because he's just too simply good. Like, he's just too simple of a solution. What we need is drama. What we need is complication. And that's why we need Sydney and Carmy to be the endgame. So, now this is me spreading my agenda, but it's true. Because first of all, we already see the chemistry. I already see the chemistry, okay? And secondly, because we know that it would be a disaster. This guy can barely cut it as Sydney's business partner, let alone romantic partner. Like, we know that this wouldn't work. But then there are times when they have so much in common, when they're finishing each other's sentences. I mean, food is what connects them. Their love of food, the love of the industry is what connects them. And I think that's enough of a connection to make it work. But I also know that knowing these characters and knowing this world, it would just end in a shambolic way. And doesn't that sound like great television to you? Come on, you're jumping on board. I'm sure you are. That's pretty much it for the main characters who had the juiciest storylines. But of course, we have the rest of the gang, the rest of my Chicago family. We have Tina and Ibra, who, as I mentioned, they were sent off to a culinary school so they could get certified or recertified in the case of Tina, so they can actually cook at this restaurant. And, you know, she got upskilled. She really embraced this experience. And also, you know, made new friends and really got out a lot more, as we saw her in the karaoke night where she was able to sing like an angel. Okay, so it was a really great experience for her, and you know, getting that seal of approval in the form of Carmy's knife really meant a lot for her. So we love to see that growth. But then on the flip side of things, we had Ibra, who was far more reluctant to embrace change, and he was really anxious at that culinary school. It just wasn't what he was used to. And so he struggled to adapt and evolve the way that he needed to for this new restaurant to work. And so we didn't really see a lot of him, but the storyline was still kind of struck a chord to show the differences in, you know, someone who is willing to embrace change versus someone who isn't. Overall, guys, when it comes to The Bear season 2, it brings me so much joy to say that this second season was not only as good as the first, but perhaps even better. This was a stellar season of television. I was hooked from the very beginning, and I was enraptured every single episode, and seeing, you know, this restaurant be built brick by brick, and seeing the vision that Carmy and Mikey had all those years back come to life was such an exhilarating experience, not only because of the amazing writing here, but also because of the characters and the way that they're characterized by these amazing actors. Like, everyone has just come together to do a brilliant job. I love this damn show. Like, I can't shower it with praise enough. I could sit here and start spitting out adjectives for hours on end, but ultimately I'm going to wrap it up by saying this is a damn good show, and I can't wait for the third season. I can't wait for the third season. And if it wasn't for the fact that I was so annoyed by Claire, it would probably be a clean 10 out of 10. But because I'm a hater, I'm going to be giving The Bear season 2 a 9.5 out of 10. So that's it from me. I'm such a hater. Also, Carmy got Sydney a Tom Brown chef's jacket. Like, that has to count for something. Anyway, now that I told you guys my thoughts on season 2 of The Bear, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of this season down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch you videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. We'll be back at it again in season 3. But until next time, bye.